Welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast by Venus O'Hara. I'm here to welcome you into the world of orgasmic living by hosting experts to discuss orgasmic topics such as nutrition, spirituality, personal development, sexuality, and much more. Here, we will offer lifestyle lessons that can help you lead a fulfilling, joyous, and orgasmic lifestyle. I'm your guide, Venus O'Hara. Welcome to episode 119 of the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast with Venus O'Hara. In this Flower Moon episode, we discuss love languages and the world of sexual wellness. We speak with Hodder-Shipp, who is a certified sex educator and the author of the book Speaking from the Heart, 18 Languages for Modern Love. And the episode ends with a guided meditation with affirmations for love languages. I'm making so much progress in my love education. I've already shared with you on here that I consider myself to be a student of love. And it's a real joy to speak with experts, relationship therapists, and people who are writing on the topic of relationships and love. I'm enjoying so much about learning from different perspectives and also learning about different ways to communicate with another person. It sounds crazy, like why do we need training or knowledge about how to communicate with other humans when we are speaking the same language? But it can get very, very, very complicated, and a lot more complicated than it seems. I remember I went to a workshop on values, and we were analyzing some basic values in the class, and we took some words and we tried to define them. And one example was the word curiosity, because that's kind of a value if you are, let's say, in a dating situation. Imagine going on a date and someone asks you no questions at all. They just don't really seem that interested in what you're doing. So that for me would imply that, for me, curiosity is about asking questions and genuinely wanting to know, not just asking, just in return because you asked me, so I ask you, that kind of thing. And what was interesting is that everyone had a different idea about what that word meant. So imagine if we cannot agree on basic definitions of words, how can we have more complicated conversations when there is the nuance of feelings and emotions that can actually definitely cloud things? So I'm really fascinated by how we can present ideas and self-expression in ways that honor ourselves and also don't offend the other person, not to make them defensive. And the book from today's guest about the modern languages for love is super interesting in that sense, because even myself, I've learned that, having a good intention is not enough. That's been one of my biggest learnings, I'd say, in the last couple of years. And because I think whenever I've done somebody wrong, I've always wanted to go back to my intention, explain, listen, it wasn't done with a bad intention. Because I think sometimes I would like the other person to know that whatever I did wasn't done in a mindless way. I was thinking this action will cause this reaction or effect with mindfulness, whereas sometimes the effect you cannot really control. But because otherwise doing things mindlessly, some people do that. Some people just don't really care about the consequences of their actions. But for me as an empath, I'm always thinking about the other person, sometimes to the detriment of myself. So that's something that was kind of a bit of an eye-opener in today's guest's book. But we're going to go into that with more detail. I think I'm going to go dive into this interview straight away today because there's so much to talk about. And I don't want to reveal it just yet. So check it out, this conversation with today's guest. It's super juicy. What if your pleasure was the portal to your power? My new book, Orgasmic Manifestation, Transform Your Life with Your Sexual Energy by Venus O'Hara, that's me. This is your guide to using desire as a tool for abundance, purpose, and deep self-connection. Your orgasm is more than a moment. It's a message, a manifestation, a mirror of your limitless potential. Available now on Amazon. Link in the show notes below. Now it's time for this episode's interview. We speak with Anne Hodder-Shipp, who is a certified sex educator and author of the book Speaking from the Heart, 18 Languages for Modern Love. Anne Hodder-Shipp, welcome to the Orgasmic Lifestyle podcast, where every day is a climax. It's such an honor to have you here. For those who are unfamiliar with your work, could you tell us what you do?
Yeah, I kind of do a bunch of things at this point, but ultimately I am a sex and relationships educator. So I coach people and educate people. I also work with parents, teenagers doing like the classic kind of sex ed. And lately I've also been teaching the teachers and I train people to have these conversations and to be able to feel more comfortable with conversations around, I mean, everything from pleasure to bodies, puberty, feelings, all of the tricky stuff. And then a project that had been kind of on the side that has now become, I think one of the reasons why you and I connected is the modern love languages, which is a modern, less patriarchal, far more expansive alternative to the classic love language concept that people are familiar with. So I wrote a book and a workbook. So I guess technically I could add author and writer to the to the resume.
Amazing. And we'll be asking you about that in a moment. So, what
Yeah.
inspired you to follow this path?
Well, it was really one of those kind of classic stories where I just was always curious and interested in these topics when I was young, and just noticing all of the adults around me were just, the classic, like, don't ask about that, or let's just pretend we didn't hear it. And I would just kind of look around like, okay, this makes people feel uncomfortable and weird, which makes me really love it even more. And so I'm gonna figure out how to understand this without your help because no one's going to help me. And then in college, I went to school to be a journalist and found myself also in the sociology direction, gender and all these topics that just still seemed to me to be a neutral, naturally curious, but also clearly someone, you know, someone up, whatever, like the powers that be, or just nobody wants us to know about this stuff for some reason, which then, of course, to me, just like lights all the light bulbs and fires the curiosity, the power of like that kind of secrecy, really the backfire is like, well, everybody then really, really wants to know about it. The more you don't want them to know about it. So when I left college, I went into the direction of sort of human sexuality research. How can I find a writing job or a magazine job in that field, and then just kind of accidentally entered the adult industry covering the business of pleasure. And from there, was still kind of doing unofficial sex ed on the side that I didn't necessarily see as sex ed at the time, but enough people had asked me about it. I had enough writing jobs and even like podcast interviews before podcasts were, what they really became, where I realized, this maybe is a direction to go in a more official way. Because the sex journalism side, definitely, I could see the future wasn't terribly bright in terms of like having a career and being able to afford to exist. And and then just started to more officially go in the sex ed route, getting trained, learning facilitation skills. And that was around, I'm looking at the clock, maybe 11 years ago is when I more officially went in that direction. And then it's just been building ever since.
Did you know what you wanted to get trained in at first? Was it clear for you to what qualification to get or what to focus on?
It's a really good question. Short answer, not really, because there
Mm,
isn't an official sort of path toward
mm.
becoming a sex educator like there is to be a therapist, or a professor, if you wanted to like get your master's in ed. So what I did know is I had a lot of knowledge. I knew how to explain things through some of my the journalism skills and breaking stuff down so it felt easier to understand and receive. And I had skills with storytelling and bringing in humor. But what I knew I wanted to at least first get going in was, what does it mean to like teach a class, or to really be in an educator role? What are some tools or skills or things to know or to consider when putting a curriculum together or answering questions, and how do you handle a group of people versus one or two people? And are there, yeah, facilitation skills that aren't necessarily sex ed specific, but definitely would be helpful to have so that when I am having conversations about topics that might be hard for people or confusing or might piss people off, because I'm quite good at pissing people off just by existing as I am. How can I bring in those skills so I can make space for all of those different reactions without it turning into something it doesn't need to be, and without it devolving potentially into the outcomes that so many of us are trying to avoid and can make these kinds of conversations so hard to have, like having an argument or um, going in like a sort of a sparring match back and forth if somebody disagrees with you and wants to make sure everybody knows that they disagree. So that was the initial start, was kind of learning those skills, and then along the way, it was also just realizing there's so much to know, and there's so much that I think that I know, or maybe I've been taught in different classes I've been in that actually might be total bullshit, might
Mm.
actually not even be rooted in anything totally real or verifiable. And then there's lots of stuff that I had learned or been taught since college, especially about things like identity and gender and the sociology of just kind of existing in relation to others that over time had sort of become antiquated. You know, there was more to know, new things to know, more expansive perspectives to consider. And so then it was sort of like, okay, yeah, kind of going into my garden, so to speak, of knowledge and seeing, what is no longer relevant for this garden, or what maybe died and I didn't notice and I need to like root it out and make space for something new. Or even like kind of going in there and taking this metaphor down super deep, like looking for things that I didn't realize were weeds that
Mm.
actually need to get the fuck out of there ASAP. And so that was a big part of my training experience and remains that part of my training experience because I'm a forever student, and to do this work, you really can't ever stop also getting trained and retrained and doing your own continuing education because there's just new information coming up all the time and new perspective that makes you realize that, oh shoot, shoot, I need to retire this piece of information that I relied on for a while that I realize actually doesn't really apply in the way that I thought.
So what's a working week like for you these days?
It's a good question too. It kind of
Mm.
is all over the place. I'm in an interesting part of my, I don't know, career slash life. And I'm not big, I don't know a lot about astrology, but I have a lot of
Mm.
astrology people in my life where like there's something planetarily, and I think I'm starting like a sixth house perfection year. They're probably listening and cringing. But it's a combo of managing the sex ed organization that I run, which is called Everyone Deserves Sex Ed. And that we're in the middle of a certification that I run a couple times a year where people want to get certified to teach sex ed, and they want to do it from a very sort of up-to-date, modern perspective versus maybe an academic heavy perspective. So I prepare during the week. I'm always updating slides and information and the other educators that I bring in, communicating with them and just kind of keeping that going. And managing some social media stuff behind the scenes. I don't post as actively right now just to kind of take a bit of a break, but there's that goes on. And sometimes, coaching clients or a lot of people signing up for like an initial consult just to kind of see like what's Anne's vibe or how do I even feel having these conversations. So that happens a lot during the week. And then trying to make space now that the weather is starting to be so beautiful to see, can I go outside for a little while and just like sit in the dirt and not potentially look at a screen for a little while. So that's what my days lately have been like.
Oh, cool, cool. Because I've been a content creator for 16 years now, and I started off writing columns for GQ and Playboy in Spain and some
Oh, wow.
newspapers. And then I ended up landing some kind of big things, and a lot of people criticized me for not being a sexologist. So I always had this imposter
Interesting.
syndrome of like, because but then people were saying that you shouldn't speak about sex unless you're qualified, and I always had that kind of doubt in my mind, or should I become a sexologist? And I was looking online all the
Mm.
time, and I was just didn't know what certification to get. But then I thought, do I really want to be let's say, quote unquote, treating people, or that's not really what I want to do. So I kind of removed myself from that world and I did consider myself to be an artist now. So I feel there's
Mhm.
less responsibility in that sense.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Your story is very familiar. I mean,
Mhm.
there's maybe this is a whole other podcast that I don't know if that would be boring for other people to hear, but like it's there's a whole thing about like, oh, you're not qualified or you're more qualified because of XYZ.
Mm,
And it's a tricky territory because there's, I mean, the word qualification or qualified tends to be used a bit as a gatekeeping tool for people who have money, are typically cisgender, hetero, white, slender, not disabled. It is a bit of a weaponized term to kind of keep certain people out or to keep them quiet or make them feel small, or irrelevant.
mm,
And then to participate in a bit of an industry behind certain kinds of certifications or degree programs that aren't necessarily really preparing you for what this work really entails. The content
mm,
tends to be very surprisingly and disappointingly antiquated or from a very particular lens that doesn't necessarily apply to like the vastness of humanity. It's really very a bit narrow in terms of its idea of what sex is, what sexual orientation means, what relationships look like, what is
mm,
sexual, pathologizing a lot of just natural human experiences. And so you have people coming out who might have the letters after their name and certain kinds of certifications that might on paper fall under the qualified
mm,
category that I wouldn't want to listen to and I would never send a client to because they
mm,
don't actually the way I would see qualification if I was to use that word, I don't consider themselves qualified at all. I consider themselves really bolstered and supported by a lot of paper and a lot of academia and a lot of letters, which have their value if you know how to use them. And
mm,
unfortunately, those programs don't really train you how to use them in ways that can really help people. And even the idea of sexology or to be a sexologist, it means like a thousand things. And technically,
mm.
it just means you research sex and sexuality. And
Yeah.
so anyone can really be a sexologist. If you want to treat people,
Mm,
you can go into like the therapy realm or the counseling realm. That would make a lot of sense. But like, I hate hearing stories where people are like, you
yeah.
shouldn't be talking about this because you're not qualified. It's just like, who the fuck are you? How dare
Yeah.
you? You know? So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I felt like that because I felt like a lot of the times. And then there was a campaign because I used to make content in Spanish about 10 years ago, and all the
Mm.
Spanish sexologists were really angry at because what they did was they made this campaign on Instagram and they said that sexology is not fuckology. Kind of thing. They were really angry that the people like myself or some others were, talking about first person experiences and sharing tips. And that
Yep.
was really triggering them, whereas they were coming at it that they felt that was taking something away from them. And there's another person who's very big in Spain. She's got millions of followers, and she was a journalist who's just become an entrepreneur, and she's kind of made a platform of sex ed. And even though she's not the main, she's the kind of face of it, but she gets qualified people on it, and she's just doing so well. And I think everyone's really envious of her because I think sometimes when you don't have those qualifications, it's less expected what you're supposed to do, and you can have more freedom in terms of entrepreneurial freedom to kind of create something of your own, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, that sounds like a really great example of someone who's knows what they want to do and what they don't want to do. And they also understand, what their lane is, but they're
Mm,
not engaging in it from a place of like, I'm not allowed because
mm,
I'll get in trouble. And more like, I understand my limitations. And so I want to collaborate and bring a community element to this work, which is so important. And then it also helps, platform other people because it's hard to have a platform when you do work like this,
mm.
especially in the last probably 10 years or so. Um, and so I love that. It's a really fantastic example.
Definitely, definitely. And also for myself, I've gone more into kind of more spiritual or more kind of a different area where there are no qualifications needed at all.
Right.
So,
Totally, totally.
mhm. So your book really intrigued me. I've heard a lot about the love languages, the five language love languages, and I think
Mhm.
people use these love languages to kind of they identify with them to a certain degree. Could you tell us about your book and why the limitations of the five love languages that we all know, or perhaps you'd like to share what they are for those who
Yeah,
aren't
for
familiar with
sure.
them? Hmm.
So, what people tend to be the most familiar with is the five love languages. I don't do any free PR or promo for the man who wrote them, in part
Hmm.
because the content itself has for lack of a better way to describe it, has revealed itself over time to be an evangelical Christian propaganda packaged as self-help and
Mm,
the secret to lasting love. So it's been a really successful and strategic way to bring very conservative value systems that for a lot of people, they're trying to heal from the trauma of being brought up in that kind of purity culture environment. And then they buy this book thinking that it's going to help them find the way to have love that lasts forever and never break up or never get divorced and it'll never be a challenge again. It's all a total scam. And the concept as the love languages as a concept separate from the five love languages has sort of expanded over the last maybe 10 or 15 years. It has been it has evolved a bit where people understandably sort of see it as a personality trait or even like a
mm,
hardwired trait, almost like sexual orientation,
mm,
where once they figure out what quote unquote their love language is, that's like a face tattoo. Like
mm,
it's theirs, that is who they are, and that's how they're going to live in the world. And so the work that I do, I my book is called Speaking from the Heart: 18 Languages for Modern Love, and it was a total accidental expansion from the original concept of love languages, partly because of the hundreds and hundreds of clients I had been working with who were holding on to this idea of what their love language was as though it was like their tether to the world. But then they were so confused about why they were struggling so much in order to find friendship, relationships, following the sort of relationship escalator, so to speak, in terms of romantic relationships, because to them, they had the key. They had
mm,
figured themselves out. So what were they doing wrong? There was so much shame, so much guilt, so much confusion. And so I realized, the idea of thinking about an emotion that is so complicated and personal, like love, and relating it to something like world languages, love that analogy, love it.
mm,
But everything else about the five love languages really it was trash. It's
mm,
very, and it sounds like a very strong statement, but this is informed by at this point about 15 years of seeing what has happened culturally and also individually to people
mm,
by the very powerful marketing behind the five love languages. So I just started to take the idea or the analogy of it and find ways that felt way more accurately applicable to how humans experience feelings, how relationships work and don't, how conflict develops, the fluidity of need, the fluidity of how you even experience love compared to how you might express it to someone else, how that ebbs and flows as you ebb and flow, how it changes from relationship to relationship, how love as a concept also has become so sexualized
mm,
that the idea of love outside of like a sexual commitment or maybe like parent child starts to make people uncomfortable. And this is all just the evolution of how love and love languages has just shifted and been, in my opinion, just kind of misrepresented and misused. And so the modern love languages it takes the sex and the romance part out of love. It is a part of love and it can be for a lot of people, but like we also love our animals, we love our friends, we love our shoes, we love musical artists we've never met. Love is far more than just sex and romance. And then sort of made a framework to use or a blueprint for people to use to explore what their actual relationship to love is. What does love really mean to them? What does it feel like to them outside of maybe the Disney-ification of love or what they think love is because it's been what they've been told or it's how it's been represented to them in the media or by caregivers or community members so that they can create a more personal relationship to it that's really on their terms. And then what they learn about themselves and their relationship to love, that's what they can take with them as they start to explore relationships, build them, maintain them. And so they're really following something that's more really true for them. And it's not like they're taking a script someone else made, a Christian minister in 1992, taking that old antiquated script doesn't even really apply to them. It applies to him and his world and like trying to figure out how to make themselves fit into that script, So it's shifting out of this trying to force a square peg into a triangular hole type of approach throwing that all in the garbage and starting from a place, a really expansive place that makes space for the inconvenient reality that love is layered and it's different and it's personal and it changes all the damn time, just like every other feeling we have. Happiness ebbs and flows. So does, our experience or understanding of love, or how we even experience it. What is it like for us? And then making space for the fact that like what love might mean to us or look to us when we're 20 probably
Mm.
isn't going to be the same when we're 25 or 40 or even like 6 months from now, because how could it? We're not robots, and feelings are not tattoos. They really can shift, and we need to make space for that. So with this book, it started as just a PDF guide for my colleagues and I to use because we didn't want to use the 5 love languages anymore. We knew it was harmful, but there wasn't anything else. And then so I made this PDF so we could have that instead. And it got some attention on social media in like 2021, right after it was released. And like it's just kind of exploded from there. So to me, it's like really clear beyond even what I thought it was going to be used for. It's very clear that people are hungry for something that feels far more like human,
Mm.
that they can use to better understand what they do and don't want and what love really means to them, so that they can then approach the world accordingly and not feel so shitty about themselves that
Mm.
they're really trying to like follow all these rules and fit into these scripts or these boxes. It's such an awful experience. So they felt clearly there was a need and a desire for something that could be way more comfortable and healing and supportive and effective to use to navigate relationships with other people.
And I read it at the weekend, and one of my reflections as a reader, because when I learned about the other five love languages, I identified immediately with the physical touch. That's kind of how
Mhm.
I express love. And I'm very, here in Spain, people always kiss each other and hug, but I'm like, no, unless it's someone I'm actually intimate with, then I'm all
Yeah,
over them like a rash. But so that really
sure.
is for me my love languages. But then when you're with someone who's a bit cold physically, then I'm like, oh, it's because I have this love language. So I think sometimes these labels can give you belonging, understanding, but also some degree limitation as well.
Yeah.
But then when I read your book, I just didn't think that it's not about 18 identities. It's just, I just think all of them are part of love. And there's only
Yeah.
one thing in it that I just thought I wasn't doing right, which is,
Mm.
which is interesting because it was pointed out to me in my most recent relationship, and something about conflict or something about I can't remember what the actual language was, but it said what something isn't, and having a good intention. And that's something that I have been quite bad. I just realized that I wasn't doing right, so to speak. For example,
Mm.
in a situation of a conflict, and your actions of causing discomfort in someone else, and you say, oh, but I had good intentions. So, I mean, and that's quite common because I think sometimes when been in that situation, I wanted it to be clear that I was acting from a place of self-awareness, but this was
Mhm.
what was behind it. This is the story I was telling myself, and this is how I acted, but that just wasn't, no, no, no. So, can you enlighten us about the
Yeah,
having good intentions but bad effects?
totally. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that, because I mean, hard relate here for sure. And I sometimes I have so much curiosity constantly that it's like tangent central, but like I'm so curious sometimes around, I've had other experiences where like to me, I was brought up that to better understand where people are coming from, it really helps to hear their intentions. It really helps to hear like the full picture behind the thing that they did or said.
Mm,
And that's true for me. Like, I really
mm,
do want to understand where people are coming from, not to excuse any harm potentially that they've caused, but just, especially if I was the one that was negatively impacted, I have a more expansive bird's eye view, of like what went down. For me, it helps counter storytelling in my head around it's because they XYZ, or they suck, or I suck, or, all the meaning stuff, the meaning making that our brains can
mm,
do. And then I had some relationships with people, and when I say relationship, it's really any interpersonal connection. Like they're not all romantic or sexual. But I had a couple where people not only did the intention or the the story behind what they did or said, not only was that a thing they weren't going to give me, to them, understanding or hearing the intention was just as bad as the harmful thing. Like they didn't give a fuck
Mm,
where I was coming from or where other people were coming from. And to me, I was like, I don't understand that. Like, I cannot compute. Why wouldn't you at least want to know? It doesn't change the impact, it doesn't excuse anything. But like, why wouldn't you want to understand that where they were coming from for like an information gathering purpose? And that's just
mm,
how my mind works, you know? And obviously there were enough people in my life and in my world who had a similar mindset on it. But then I met these people where I was just like, oh, this is helpful to know that like not everybody gives a fuck hearing about the intention, and hearing about the intention might actually make it worse. And so fast forward then doing the modern love language work, at the same time really diving a bit deeper into concepts of transformative and restorative justice, where you really spending time on the intention really ends up serving the person who has potentially caused harm, but really causing a disservice to the person who's been impacted,
mm,
because it's all about where the person was coming from. And then meanwhile, the person impacted is kind of just like, hello, though, like I'm over here. Can we move on to the next step in this process, please? And where if we can shift the focus onto just like the impact while making space for, and this is a generalization, I would say a majority it's very common for when we have a negative impact on someone, we did not have a negative intent at all. I would say it's relatively common for a lot of people to have had an incredibly positive intention behind the thing they did or said that ended up landing flat for
mm,
someone. And so we don't even, in those cases, we don't even need to worry about the intention because we know or we trust that the intentions were positive to start and that the person wasn't meaning to have a negative impact on the other. So we don't even need to like, we got it, you know, we got that part. Now we can put a lot of this time and energy and really like love and care toward the person who's been impacted to understand, what do you need to say or what do you need to hear? How can we be supported? Or here are some ways we can support you. Tell us if it works for you. But also at the end of the day, like you get to in this moment call the shots around like what do you need, what will help us move forward, not from a punitive place,
mm,
not from this idea of this person is bad, therefore we need to find a punishment for them, but really more like, yeah, this is how this felt for me, this is how I'm feeling now about it. I don't know what I need or want, but I do know I want to not talk to them for a little while. Great,
mm,
we'll check in, or you check in with us. Maybe it would end up being like, what do you need in order to be able to move forward, knowing that this impact has happened? And then they might actually know or have some things that they need. Like, I need to be able to tell the person how this impacted me and know that I can say it without it becoming an argument.
mm,
Or I know I can share how this impacted me without then having the focus turn on the intention instead. And then it's like, great, let's set a container to be able to have that conversation that is on your terms as the person who has been impacted and needs the support to be able to move forward. And so there's a really, like a very intentional focus behind the impact or the result of the action versus the intention. I want to pause there because, of course, it's like trying to condense something into an answer that feels like, I don't know, digestible on a podcast. I want to see like how did that land, or is there anything that
mm.
any like other questions or things that came up as I was explaining that?
I think it's interesting, but I think you have to be with someone who is on the same, because I'm a student of love at the moment. So I think it's so important that you are, with someone who is also a student of love. So you don't get into this
Hmm.
self-righteous battle of who's right, or it
Hmm.
can't just be one person who is initiating these types of conversations or the growth. It has to be mutual. And because I just realized going through your book, I mean, I'm just really realizing that I was in a very toxic dynamic and I wasn't really aware of
Mm.
it. And there's just so many things like I could just see, oh wow, this because for those who haven't read your book,
Mhm.
there were 18 languages, you'd say, and then there's like an explanation, then what it looks like, and then what it doesn't look like. And then that's kind of really
Mhm.
nice how that's done, and it's very easy to read, very digestible. But I find that it's not really an identity. It's more about these are all things that are present in healthy relationships. So,
Yeah, yeah, I would say the idea of, a lot of shifting of mindsets and perspectives, it's challenging because it really
mm,
is, if I want to use the language analogy because I love it, it's like you might be, you spoke German
mm,
and Spanish most of your life, and you realize like, oh, I actually didn't even know that I could learn Farsi, and it looks like I need to better understand Farsi for this relationship I'm in. So I'm
mm,
going to learn this language. And we don't become fluent overnight. We definitely don't even become
mm,
fluent over a year. We don't, maybe, like, we have to give ourselves the grace to learn and screw up and be confused and stumble around just as if we were learning a brand new world language for the first time. And so, like, this idea of impact over intent, not something I invented as a concept, of course. It's very much transformative restorative justice, concepts of conflict resolution, or at least or repair if possible. And when we're in a relationship where we might not be on the same page around these kinds of perspectives, sometimes the goal is really more about, okay, how can I approach or engage with this differently from how I have in the past? And how can I engage with this from a place of what I know I want, which is maybe an impact focus versus intent?
mm,
And I don't want to approach it from right, wrong binaries or
mm,
good, bad binaries. This other person might, though.
mm,
And so I can't change that about them. What do I need for myself to be able to be in the presence of people with that preference, right, wrong, good, bad, without getting sucked into that or sucked back in? Because most of us grew up and were taught that culturally as like an attitude, it's right or wrong, good or bad. Um, and we're constantly, or we have to be consistently practicing not falling back into it like a rubber band, springing back into that old place because we know it fucking sucks and is not
mm,
actually very humane whatsoever. And so in those moments, the skill may be really just focusing on like knowing what's true for you, knowing what your intentions were, also knowing what your impact ended up being. You might not understand how this person is feeling, but you don't necessarily even have to. And then it's like, oh yeah, what can I do? What do I need to do to be in the presence of their thing without absorbing it or getting completely coded in it? And if I do, what support can I get elsewhere? And then knowing, as you are clearly doing now, having a bit of thought around this actually may end up being a toxic place for me because we are not aligned in some pretty core ways that, among other things, probably will make conflict impossible to really be
mm,
able to move through or exist within without it feeling harmful to everybody involved. And so in the book that I wrote, one of the things that had come up a lot when I was just teaching about love as a concept, as an expansive emotional experience, a physical experience too, um, was how easy it is to misinterpret or
mm,
misrepresent or misunderstand your own cues as well as other people's. And so when we pick up a book because we want to get guidance or support, we're receiving it all through our own lens. And our
mm,
lens and our filters are biased because of the world, how we grew up, what our feelings are, how we feel that day, our perspectives, all kinds of things. So if I only described a tool for like, here's what this means, but I didn't also show some common potential misunderstandings or misrepresentations of it, I'm not fully helping people wrap their heads around the concept because because it makes sense to me, I may be explaining something in a way that then gets received and interpreted in a way that makes sense to them,
mm,
which may end up meaning they are misinterpreting what I'm trying to tell them. And so by having sections for each modern love language that shows here are some examples of what it could look like, not from a place of right or wrong, but just it could look like this. It might not for you, but it could
mm,
look like this. But then also a page around this is not what I'm saying though. Like this is
mm,
not what this is about. And having those examples too, it really helps reduce the risk of certain kinds of misunderstandings or very understandable misinterpretations just because of, the lens that we're using to receive that information or read the information through. And I found a lot of people have shared that the section that shows like this is what this is not has been really helpful for them in ways they didn't expect, because it was nice for them to see examples of something that might have been present in their life and made sense to them at the time, but actually may have fallen in the direction of like, actually, this might be not very loving, or this
Yeah.
might actually not be very helpful. And why would you ever know that until it was maybe shown to you in a different way, where you're like, oh shit, okay, fuck, I was doing it. Okay, no, that makes more sense now. And so it's like even more information to use moving
Mm,
forward.
definitely. For those who are listening, I'm sure they're curious about what are the 18 modern love languages. Would you like
Yeah,
to list
I'll,
them?
I'll read them. I'll read
Mhm.
them in alphabetical order.
Uh-huh.
I have them here. I can never memorize them in alphabetical order because that's not how my mind works. But they're also available. Like you can find them online. It's
Mm.
definitely not a gate kept concept. I'm definitely not into that. Um, And I'll also even preface for some people, the idea of there being like 18, they're like, that's too fucking many, or like, I'll never remember that. It's like, that's fine. I don't remember them all either sometimes. Like,
Mhm.
that's not the goal. It's not
Mhm.
meant to be a neat and tidy categorized experience because we are not robots. And like, LOL, how on earth could anyone think they could take something like love and like neat and tidily organize it
Mhm.
into 5 categories? Like,
Mhm.
hilarious.
Mhm.
And also there's even more than 18. Like there's
Mhm.
just more experiences or examples of love that I just know exist and have come up since I wrote the book, where I'm just like, yeah, there's another version of this book that is in process literally right now, and some people are going to be like, fuck, I don't want any more, and then for others they'll be like, oh hell yeah, I'm so glad to have more options. Because as you said, it's not like an identity. This is not a
Mhm.
sexual orientation that you carry with you. It's
Mhm.
examples of how love can look and feel and be expressed and show up.
Mhm.
It's really not about the person. It's about the experience of love and how fluid it really is. And the modern love languages are meant to just kind of give an example of several of the many ways that love can show up so you can better recognize it when it does show up for you. You might
Mhm.
notice it better because you see it represented as an action or a body sensation versus a category that is so broad, it could mean so many different things to people. Hence the misinterpretation and misunderstanding that is just so common and rampant with the five.
Mhm.
Long preface.
Mhm.
So we're starting with accountability. We have active listening, acts of empathy, affirming communication, bestowing, emotional labor, engaged experiences, intentional time, personal growth, platonic touch, problem solving, providing, shared beliefs, solidarity, teamwork, thoughtful service, undivided attention, and upskilling.
Love it. I want to have all of those on my next relationship. It's going to be my checklist.
And also, I
Amazing.
encourage you too, like if you notice that there's something that you, I don't know, notice for yourself that you're doing or saying, or you're
Mhm.
noticing that the person or people that you're with are doing or saying something, or you're feeling something in your body and you're like, this feels relevant to me, this feels resonant as my experience of love. Write that shit down, even if it
Mhm.
doesn't seem to be like one of the 18. I'm not like the ruler of how this is supposed to be. Like it's
Mhm.
such a human experience. And this book even came out because of the hundreds of people I worked with,
Mhm.
not coming from like, this is what Anne thinks it should be, and more like, this is how Anne sees the world.
Mhm.
And this is what people have shared with Anne because they were willing to, that helped then flesh out what I saw or my perspective on it. So it's not like a one way experience where like I'm the expert and everyone else isn't. And you can like you might for yourself, you might find like there's, I don't know, like 30 or 70, and you can have a little notebook and you write them down. And if they resonate so much in you, and I'll say this to listeners too, like if you notice that there are some that feel separate from the 18 in the book and they're really resonant to you, email it to me. I will include it in the next book and you will be in the acknowledgments, like you will be credited. It's really like a collaborative experience because it's love is too vast and expansive and all over the place and personal for one or even 10 people to
Mhm.
be able to like sum it all up for
Mhm.
everybody else.
Yeah, I've got to tell you too that I remember Todd Barrett's, he's written that book, How to Love Someone
Mhm.
Without Losing Your Mind. He's been on this
Yeah,
podcast and he mentions that
love him.
sex is a love language, which I really agree with. I think sex is a love language. And also, I think for me, something I've shared with my female friends is that for me, like blowjobs are a real love language. Like when you get into that
Hmm.
moment with, you can have a casual hookup, whatever, but then the moment when you start making an effort with oral sex, that means something has shifted in my heart, you know?
Yeah, so do you mean like for you on the giving end of that pleasure, it's like you notice when you're really, really in it, it's coming from a really authentic place?
It's not even about giving, it's about I want to explore and taste. It's almost for my own
Oh,
pleasure.
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh,
So,
I mean, that makes total sense. I think one thing that is just helpful for people to hear about my approach with the modern love
mm,
languages is that for a lot of people, acts of sex or sexual pleasure
mm,
can be a really big expression of love.
mm,
And unfortunately, it can also be sometimes even not on purpose, a bit of a weaponization of
absolutely.
something that's so like personal or vulnerable, or it becomes transactional. And because we have
Mm,
so much trauma, sadly, around sex, that the from my lens thinking about certain sexual experiences, I mean, I could have those kinds of experiences even fall under intentional time
mm,
and engaged experiences where sex is a part of expressing of love for a lot of people, but it doesn't have to be, and it doesn't necessarily have to have its own category of
mm,
expression of love, because that's where we can sometimes go into a bit of a tricky territory around,
absolutely. Yeah.
well, sex is my love language, and so if you don't fuck me, you don't love me, and that's abuse. How dare
Mm,
you? Like
mm,
coercion and really fucked up stuff. And so and just for helpful potentially for listeners too, especially for anybody on the asexual spectrum for whom
mm,
sex just is either not a big part of their lives, or it might actually be something that they're just like, no, thank you, or they feel maybe even repulsed by it. Certain like sex acts can be involved in any of these 18 modern
mm,
love languages if it's something that applies to you and the people that you are with.
mm,
And it might not at all.
mm,
And it's okay if it's not. And it's okay if it is, as long as it's coming from a really understanding place around things like, body autonomy and understanding internal or external, pressure, or sometimes the transactional, what's the word? Like the transactional vibe that sometimes we can experience when it comes to sex as like a give get, or
mm,
like owing it, or like if you don't do this I won't feel as loved, or if I don't do this they might not feel as loved, so I'll do it anyway. So I just also want to bring that in just because from this work over the last chunk of years, noticing people's experience of sex and how sex has shown up and confused things for people when it comes especially to love languages. I just want to make space for the fact that like sex can be a part of it, and it it doesn't have to be. And I don't know, making space
mm.
a little bit for maybe some of that confusion or complication for people. Does
Cool.
that make sense?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think it's really important because as you say, it can be very nuanced about, when sex is withheld or, weaponized as
Hmm.
well. Or people to people, and also for life changes, you could be in a time of your life where, you're sick or having a baby or you're just stressed, or there could be millions of motives. So a
Yeah.
couple of quick questions I ask all of my guests.
Yeah.
What is the book that changed your life?
Oh, interesting. That's a good question. On the spot, sometimes my brain has a hard time pulling on things. I will say, a bit of a classic. It changed my life, but not necessarily in just one way.
Hmm.
Um, but, Emily Nagoski's Come As You Are was a really helpful tool for seeing how a sex educator specifically can use things like analogy and metaphor to help break down potentially complicated or confusing or just sensitive topics for people in ways that can be more easily absorbed. And so that was really life changing in that way, or maybe profession changing, where I was able to kind of see, oh, I really can see how Emily's mind works, breaking this stuff down. And it makes me feel affirmed in my analogy use because I sometimes go to town on analogies. And then, and that like feeling of affirmed really kind of helped give a little bit of permission to like keep going in the direction that I was.
Cool. And what about an affirmation or quote that you live by?
It's funny. Without context, maybe it'll sound weird, but like, who fucking cares?
Yeah, we love
That's
weird.
really just like, who cares?
Yeah, we love weird on here. Yeah.
Oh yeah, weird
Yeah.
is like people have tried since I was very, very young to like make me feel small or make me feel shitty by
Mm,
describing me in ways that were just accurate.
mm,
Like, oh no, I'm weird. That means you're fucking boring
mm.
and like stuck in some script. So like, thanks for the compliment. Like you for calling me weird. Thank you for seeing me.
So what's the phrase? What's the phrase? It's like, thank you for seeing my I'm weird or what?
No, and the phrase literally is who fucking cares? Like
Oh,
that's what
okay.
yeah. Like who cares? Who fucking cares? Sorry,
Okay.
did that land like I
No,
was saying who
no.
cares to your question?
No,
Oh my
it's good.
God.
It's good.
No, it's a great question. But that's the thing I say at the end of the day. It's like when I get stuck and I'm worried about something, or maybe other people's opinions or my own like spiral around like, what about this? What about this? I just like interrupt myself and I'm just like, oh, who fucking cares? And I go outside. I have to
No.
just interrupt myself.
Yeah, I've had on this guy who's a really big meditation teacher on here, and he's all about honoring your weird. And I actually, because in these podcasts at the end of each episode, I do an affirmations meditation, and I made one about honoring your weirdness for his
Love
one.
it.
I think it's just so unique because we spend a lot of our lives, especially when we're teenagers, trying to fit in, and then when we grow up, then we can stand out, and then be who we are in our entirety and have permission to. So that's what it's all about, really, and just honoring who
Totally.
you are, and then obviously that'll help you find love. I believe. Well, I'm hoping.
Definitely. Even at least love with yourself, some
Mm,
level of love to
for
kind of
sure.
counter some of the messaging and the negative self-talk that often ends up mirroring the negative shit other people said
Mm,
to us when we were little.
definitely. So where can people find you?
The internet is the easiest way. My
Mm,
personal website is annhodder-shipp.com,
mm.
and that will link to Everyone Deserves Sex Ed, which is the sex ed work that I do. It'll link to the Modern Love Languages. They can also go to the modernlovelanguages.com if they want to just go straight there and look at the book and the workbook and some of the coaching work that I do there.
Oh, great. So Anne Hodder-Shipp, it's been a real pleasure to have you here on the Orgasmic
Yeah.
Lifestyle.
Thanks for having me.
No book review in this episode, but I want to let you know that there is also a YouTube channel called The Orgasmic Lifestyle, and on it you will find the videos of all of my interviews. If you are a visual person, you want to see some of the experts, it's a bit different way of enjoying the knowledge that we share on here. I'm personally more of a video person, to be honest. I never listen to podcasts, but I'm grateful for you listening to this podcast. Anyway, so check out The Orgasmic Lifestyle on YouTube. And thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. I appreciate you so much. Now it's time to slow things down as we prepare for this episode's guided affirmations meditation. It's probably not a good idea to listen to this while driving or operating machinery. Instead, take a break from whatever you're doing, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and enjoy. I am open to loving and being loved. My needs are worthy of being met. I communicate with honesty and care. I am clear, calm, and confident in my relationships. I trust love to to flow in healthy ways. I welcome love that feels nourishing and real. I'm grateful for open, honest communication. I am open to loving and being loved. My needs are worthy of being met. It's okay to ask for affection and support. I listen with love and I speak with intention. I honor my emotions and express them freely. Love meets me where I am. I am grateful for open, honest communication. I am open to loving and being loved. My needs are worthy of being met. Understanding starts with presence. I deserve deep, connected love. I am worthy of love in the way I understand it. I express my needs with confidence and clarity. I am grateful for open, honest communication. I am open to loving and being loved. My needs are worthy of being met. It's safe to ask for what I need. I give and receive love freely. My love language is valid and important. I honor how others give and receive love. I am grateful for open, honest communication. I am open to loving and being loved. My needs are worthy of being met. I deserve to feel heard and supported. I receive love with ease. I speak my truth with kindness. I listen to my partner with empathy and openness. I am grateful for open, honest communication. What if your next unforgettable orgasm was just one click away? Meet Tracy's Dog, the brand behind some of the most loved pleasure products on the market. Whether you're craving intense suction, blended bliss, or a toy that does it all, they've got you covered. And to make it even sweeter and unforgettable, you can get 15% off site-wide with my code VENUS. Head to tracysdog.com and discover your new favorite toy and use the code VENUS at checkout. Enjoy! find out more about me and my orgasmic lifestyle, visit venusohara.org or follow me on Instagram at instagram.com/venusohara. Make sure to search for the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast by Venus O'Hara in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thanks for listening, have an orgasmic week, and make sure every day is a climax.